back for an update with you, Pastor Turner. We just posted our latest No Hate in the Heartland video, which was you talking about the upcoming Centennial, but it was you talking about the Centennial in August of 2020. And here we are now in February of 2021, full steam ahead. This date is coming. So I just wanted to check in because a lot has unfolded in the last months. Wanted to get some words on that and just update everybody on what's going on, and maybe elaborate on a few points. So the first thing I have to ask is, you're a member of the Centennial Commission. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And there's been a lot of news regarding the Centennial Commission in regards to Senator Lankford and his recent comments that have been made in Washington, D.C. On the floor of the Senate. And then a public apology that came, he admitted that he kind of had a blind spot in his words. There was a public outcry, very loud, for him to resign from the commission. But you being on the commission, you have been inside in those conversations. So I just wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah, well, there's what happened in the nation's capital on January 6th is inexcusable. The rhetoric, the lies that were fomented, is just what have already been proven wrong, right? And we have had a few commission meetings about that, and we have been told, and in those meetings we had frank conversations with the senator. And because I'm a part of that commission and I respect, the confidentiality of our proceedings, I'm not at liberty to say, what all transpired. But it was a very, very tense, strong conversations that we had. And we do have a statement. We have released a statement on that that kind of summarizes our position. And that's available. I can send that to you or your audience. And we have spokesmen who have been, chosen to speak on that and to speak on that going forward. So I'm not at liberty. When I'm a part of an organization, when we talk about things in our meetings, that's kind of where it stays. But yeah. I can't say, as far as my personal opinion, I think it was appalling, and it just has no place. What happened in the nation's capital? It was an insurrection, and no ifs, ands, buts about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and absolutely, when it was happening, there's all kinds of triggers that are happening across the country for all kinds of communities, but I can only imagine what kind of triggers could be happening for the community in Greenwood, the community that lives in the area where Black Wall Street was in and of itself burned, attacked, killed by a white mob. I mean, was that triggering?
Absolutely. Very triggering. We at Greenwood, we saw what happens when a white mob can descend without any fear of reprisal. And it burned down over 35 square blocks of Black-owned property. It burned down 600 businesses. It burned churches. It burned hospitals, schools, to the ground. Homes burned to the ground. And we see that same incident. Well, we saw that same incident occur in our nation's capital. An attempt to do that. They did not burn the nation's capital down, but the invasion of our nation's capital is something that we have not seen. I mean, they did things that Putin wish he could have done. They did things that North Korea, they did things that Stalin never did. They did things that Robert E. Lee and the Confederacy never did. They brought a Confederate flag inside the nation's capital.
Yeah.
A treasonous flag flown by a rebellious government. Their flag was flown inside the nation's capital. That's something that Jefferson Davis and Robert E. Lee could never do.
No.
But this insurrection mob that was endorsed by the president. I mean, he called this meeting. We've never seen that before, but it just shows you and the difference in treatment from how the Black Lives Matter protesters were treated just this past summer to how these white mob members were treated, these insurrections were treated. It shows you that really when white people do violence, they're not seen, and they kill police officers, by the way. They kill Capitol Police officers, but they are not seen as like an aberration to law enforcement. They're when white mobs attack, they're seen by and large as an extension of the white law enforcement of law enforcement in this country. And that is the difference. When Black people protest, we're always seen as being protagonists to law enforcement. When white people protest, even violently, they're seen almost as an extension. Well, because the law enforcement can't do it, we're going to do what you can't do. And so they're seen as the extension. And we saw that in Tulsa in 1921. The white mob was an extension.
They were deputized.
That's right. They even deputized members of that white mob. So that's why, I mean, and nobody's really talking about that. The difference in treatment was when Black people protest, we're automatically seen as protagonists to law enforcement. But when white people protest, even violently, they're seen as an extension of law enforcement. They're doing what the law enforcement can't do. Sometimes they do. We saw with Terrence Crutcher, we saw with Tamir Rice, we saw with Eric Gardner, we saw with Trayvon Martin, we saw not Trayvon Martin, we saw with Botham Jean, we saw with Sandra Bland, we saw with several people, and even citizens like George Zimmerman think that they're an extension. That's how Trayvon Martin got killed. He thought he was a neighborhood watch captain. So anytime Black people are assaulted, the white supremacists, a mob, they see themselves not as opposite or against law enforcement. They see themselves as an extension of it.
And here we are 100 years after the massacre, and it's still the same.
Yep.
That a white mob can be seen as quote unquote deputized, whether it's official or not. In society's eyes, it is official.
And that's why the president even said, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
But that's why the president even said after Charleston and after a car ran through a crowd of people, right? They're good people. You know, he even said after the insurrection, these are good people, and I love you. Because in his eyes, white people can't be opposed to the power structure because white people are the power structure. In his eyes, if white people protest, it's only as an extension of the power structure to do the dirty work that most folks want to do anyway, but these folks just have enough courage to do it. That's why they call them patriots. That's why you have people now who are against folks like in the Republican Party. People are against their own, like Lynn Cheney and like Ben Sass, because they had the bold and courage to speak up against this.
Right.
They had the boldness and courage to vote for impeachment, you know, like Liz Cheney. And now they're being cannibalized because it's like their constituents are saying, how dare you think that what they did was wrong? They did what we all wanted to do. They just could afford the ticket and a time to go to DC to do it.
So this makes me want to circle back to the dynamics with Senator Langford. Fully respect that there are difficult conversations that happen in committee meetings, especially in executive session. But what I can't help but feel is that what's expected is that the Black community and communities of color, what I see is that they're always the ones that have to be conciliatory, that have to be the bigger person, that have to extend the branch of reconciliation first. And I'm wondering, is that something that's real, or am I just seeing that? And B, is that because the power structures in the United States have never empowered Black people to hold white people accountable?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that dates back to the very origin of this country, right? This country was founded by racists.
Yes.
This country was founded by slave owners.
Yes.
And so Black people have always, just being a citizen, had to recognize that the overwhelming majority of people in this country don't value our very existence. In fact, they thought we were 3/5 human. And that is something that has not really been quantified today. And that ideology has not really been spoken to. The fact that Black humanity has always been seen as less than. So yeah, I think a lot of that is in play. I think that we have white people who, with all the best intentions, still oftentimes don't fully appreciate the gravity of the ideology of white supremacy. White supremacy is not real, right? It is something that we create. It's a social construct. White people are not superior to Black people. Black people are not superior to white. So it is not real, but it is an ideology, like something that you believe. Like my faith, because I believe it is real. But empirically, we cannot say that this proves. That's the definition of faith. You can't be proven, right? And so an ideology is something that you just believe, and I think that is not fully appreciated. We have people who ran for president that said that America does not have a problem with systemic racism. I mean, that's a problem. That's a problem. But as African Americans, we've learned how to cooperate and coexist as citizens in this nation with people that we know don't even want us to be here. Like, as soon as we got off the off the plantation, they were like, okay, y'all can go back to Africa now because we have no use for you. And because a lot of us didn't go back to Africa, they created the prison system and they just start putting us in there. And then once all of us weren't going to prison, let's just create a place for them to live. And that's when they started with the quote unquote ghettos and all these places for us to live, and the redlining for us to live. And then once people said, well, that's illegal, and then so people should be able to live wherever they can afford to buy a house. And now you see, still today, the vast number of top wage earners are non-Black people. So now it's not me saying you are red line from leaving your hood. It is, you won't ever get a job to pay you enough that will allow you to live next door to me. And now, okay, you got integrated schools, but now I could just take my kids out and send them to private school because I know you can't afford to do that.
Right.
Because this system won't allow you to make a job or get a job that will pay you X number of dollars. And I know that there are outliers like the celebrities, because people love saying, well, Oprah Winfrey can live well if she wants to, and LeBron James, but by and large, they are the exception,
right,
and not the rule.
Right.
And even they show you the depravity of our society, that America is willing to invest more money in athletic programs than they are in educational programs. I went to the University of Alabama, Roll Tide. They invest more money in the football program. I love Nick Saban, best coach ever, greatest of all time. But we invest more in athletics than we do in education.
Yeah.
And that's in every southern state. Georgia, Mississippi, Florida, even Oklahoma. The football team has things that we wish we had in North Tulsa public schools. So if we're not shaking our behind, if we're not running a football, if we're not shooting a jump shot, you have no value. If you cannot entertain the white masses, you have no value. And so we will not fund, we will not support, we will not invest anything into you. We show we have the capacity to invest.
Yes.
But it's only for things that will be for our entertainment.
I wanna come back to the centennial that's approaching. Obviously, there's a lot of tension. What we saw, I heard you speak on a panel last night for the Tulsa chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha, amazing conversation that they hosted. And there was a lot of conversation about the economics surrounding what happened in the massacre. the generational wealth that was stripped from the community, the city essentially taking over the community. And in the video we recorded in August, you mentioned that the biggest landowner in the Greenwood district is the city of Tulsa. So they are clearly benefiting from Greenwood and Black Wall Street being gone, and yet have yet to recognize and provide reparations and do the work of acknowledging and atoning for what they have done. You made a comment last night that I think everyone just went, whoa, because when Black Lives Matter was painted on the street in Tulsa, it was instantly removed. So it showed that the city, and specifically the mayor, care more about action regarding paint on the street than the blood on the street, to use your exact quote. Can you just elaborate on these dynamics? Because when we move into the Centennial, we're moving into an acknowledgement of an event that the city itself has not fully taken ownership of, right? Yeah. So can you just expound your wisdom on that dynamic?
It is everything you said. We have a centennial approaching, a centennial commemoration. But unfortunately for the Black community, it is not a celebration.
Right.
It is not a celebration because we still are suffering from the present day. We're suffering present day from the effects of yesterday. And what do I mean by that? What the white mob was intending to do in 1921 wasn't just to create mass graves. It wasn't just to kill or to steal. What they sought to do was to divest us of property. Mm. And if you fast forward 100 years later now, they were successful because Black people in the over 35 square blocks, city square blocks of area that they destroyed, Black people in large part don't own that property. In fact, the only original landowners in the historic Greenwood district that own the same piece of land that they owned in 1921 are just two churches. Mount Zion Baptist, that was completely burned. They have a monument, a plaque on their church, very historic church, and historic Vernon Edmond Church. We're the only two entities that are still landowners that are Black.
Black landowners.
Yes. Like, in the whole Greenwood district, we're the only ones that are the original. I mean, and so that shows you just how pervasive and how unrelenting the mission was to divest us of property. They burned it to the ground in 1921. We rebuilt. This church rebuilt in 1925. One of the first things rebuilt that we still have still standing. And we saw a resurgence in Black Wall Street after the massacre. And that lasted for several decades, up until the building of the interstate highway, up until urban renewal, we call removal. And this
is a very important point. And I'd like to hear you say more about this, because I think this is a piece of the story that maybe is missing, is that even after 1921, the Black community was like, well, we're going to rebuild.
That's right.
Because resiliency, effort, passion, we're taking it back, right? So then, just like Jim Crow laws became a response to the end of possession of Black people, what did the city of Tulsa do? Urban renewal.
That's right.
And then Black Wall Street was lost again. I just wanted to point that out as a point that is missing in a lot of conversation. Please continue though, because I interrupted you.
You're absolutely right. So we rebuilt, even though we got no insurance claim money. even though we got not one dime in reparations, even though none of us had a house or a business to go back to work in after the massacre. We had to rebuild everything, right? They still had the wherewithal and the perseverance and the resilience to rebuild Black Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
And that lasted for several decades up until the interstate highway that came directly through the heart of the Black community. And unfortunately, Tulsa is not unique in that. That happened all over the country. The reason why you don't, the reason why you see in other communities, a Chinatown, a Mexico town, places where predominantly Asian people have businesses, a place where predominantly Spanish-speaking folks have businesses, and you don't see like an Africa town or a place where African Americans have business, is because our places were destroyed. We had it first. We had it in the 1920s. In the year 1919 through the 1925, there was a total of over 52 race massacres across this country. Over 52 places where Black people in places like East St. Louis, Atlanta, Georgia, Durham, North Carolina, Rosewood, Florida, of course, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Washington, D.C., any place where Black people had a thriving economic enterprise, white folks got jealous and they burned it to the ground.
Well, heaven forbid. Heaven
I know,
forbid.
right?
Yeah.
That's because this is like a few generations out of slavery. So it's like, you know, in their mind, they're like, how in the world can these folks, when it's illegal for them to even know how to read, how dare they have a doctor's office or a lawyer's office or a hotel? Who gave them the permission? And this, mind you, is before affirmative action. This is before Pell Grants. This is before any so-called governmental help program.
That's right.
Where white conservatives think that Black people need in order for us to thrive. Before we had any social programs, we were thriving because folks just left us alone.
Yep.
They left us alone. And in fact, what killed us was government intervention. The building of the interstate highway killed us. That was a federal program. And they put the interstate highway through the heart of all of our Black economic zones. They did it in Tulsa. They did it in Birmingham. They did it in Atlanta. They did it in Texas. They did it in Houston. They do it everywhere Black people have been successful. They put the interstate highways through our communities. That's why I commend new Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg for saying he's going to look into this and start actually removing some of these interstate highways that have been placed intentionally through historically Black communities with no off-ramp, by the way. So they put the interstate highway through Greenwood with no off-ramp to encourage people to patronize our businesses. They just bulldoze it through with no off-ramp.
And this, you know, these are conversations that people need to be understanding, because this is systemic racism. Mm-hmm. This is exactly how this works. Black communities were thriving, doing amazing, could have surpassed the wealth of all these white communities, and white people couldn't have that. Mm-hmm. So systems were put in place. When the burning and pillaging didn't take care of it, mm-hmm. then a system was built by a city and a state to help curb that progress. And that is what systemic racism looks like. If you don't know, that's an example.
And not only that, while they were putting interstate highways through the Black community, they created interstate highways in the suburbs and in the white communities with off-ramps. And that's how you began the creation of the suburb that we have today in America. So all these suburbs that we have, Broken Arrow, Edmond, all these, in Alabama, we got a place called Hoover. All of them were created like right after or right during this time period. You created centers where now multimillionaires live, white people, and you protect their property interests. Meanwhile, you decimated Black property value.
Right. Where are we on reparations for the city of Tulsa? Not the city. From the city for Black Wall Street.
Where we are, only God knows. I just seek to be obedient and do what he's called me to do every Wednesday, to go out and preach and to call the city to recognize what she did and to repent from this evilness of racism, and to also repair the harm and damage. We have a petition. If anyone would like to sign it at change.org, just type in Tulsa 1921 reparations, change.org. It is now the largest petition that we have for reparations.
Okay.
We have well over 25,000 signatures now. We also, in addition to that, now have begun a letter writing campaign to our elected officials. And so if anyone would like to get a copy of that letter that they can either email or put through regular mail, I'll be happy to share that. We are really trying to encourage our city council members and mayor to do more than just have a ceremony on the Centennial, but to actually do justice. We have a few survivors left, people. We have a lot more surviving institutions like churches that are still here. And the city has done nothing at all to recognize or to give them justice. We still call on the district attorney to investigate the worst crime in his jurisdiction in this city's history. And we encourage the attorney general to investigate the worst crime in this state's history. And we
because
encourage
it's never been investigated.
Never. We encourage the U.S. Attorney General to investigate the worst race massacre in American history. It has never been an investigation. And I get tired of people saying, well, it happened so long ago. That's very convenient for the white supremacists. That's very convenient for the white mob to say, well, it happened so long ago. Let's just get over it. It's over and done with.
They're saying that about the nation's capital 6 days after the fact.
Exactly.
Get over it.
Exactly. But these are the same people that can't get over an election that Donald Trump lost.
Mm-hmm.
They want us to get over a race massacre where people died, and they can't get over an election where Donald Trump got his behind beat. And this same country has people that can't get over losing the Civil War. They still have these Civil War reenactments. They still wave the Confederate flag as if they're still fighting the Confederate cause. Oh, they may be. But meanwhile, they want us to forget and get over slavery. They want us to forget and get over the 1921 race massacre. But they haven't gotten over losing the Civil War. They haven't gotten over losing the presidential election. They're still mad about schools being integrated. They're still mad about busing, but we're supposed to get over our suffering. Well, people actually died. That to me is the epitome of white privilege and white supremacy. Well, you can tell an oppressed group to get over their suffering. Meanwhile, you a privileged class and you mad that you lost. You still mad hundreds of years later that you lost the Civil War. And you got these Confederate flags on your pickup trucks. You mad months later that your candidate lost an election. Meanwhile, Black people weren't even able to participate in presidential elections for the vast majority of our existence in this country.
Right.
And we never committed an insurrection at the nation's capital. We were enslaved by this nation, and we never committed an insurrection at the nation's capital. You won, and you still complaining. That's crazy.
I mean, white privilege.
Yeah.
White
absolutely.
To the max. All right. So in closing, we're leading up to the date. And what I hear you saying is that there's a petition on change.org that people can sign demanding justice.
Yes.
And that there's a letter writing campaign. And if you can send that to me, I'll push it out along with this video for people. So we want to encourage everyone to do that. It sounds like the narrative for advocates for reparations and justice need to be vocal about that having to be a piece of any recognition that's coming up in the city of Tulsa. Right?
Exactly. And I forgot to mention there's also a lawsuit that I was the original plaintiff on, Vernon was, for reparations. And if people want to know more about that, tell them to look up Justice for Greenwood as well.
Okay, great. Because I know people are going to be hungry and wanting to do something. So we'll make sure that we get that information with this video. Any closing thoughts?
Reverend Fleck, I just really appreciate you for your leadership that you provide. I know it is not easy being who you are and doing what you do. I just pray that God continues to watch over you and your family and protects you as you're on your sojourn for truth and for love and for justice. So, and thank you so much for having me.
Well, yes, thank you. We know you're busy and very in demand. All right, I will include all of this information in this video. Thank you again to Dr. Turner, and we'll stay in touch.